Good morning. My name is Mike Masterson. I'm an automation specialist with the Reynolds Company. I want to welcome you to today's users group, and we will be covering process systems. Well, we're doing a process system update. Just want to let you know we have some upcoming events. We have a tech talk on the 25th of this month. We're going to be going over asset management. And then our next two user groups for June and July. In June, we're going to be covering redundant network architectures. Then we're going to look at modernization of your systems in July. Also want to point everybody to our new improved website. If you get a chance, I'd like you to go to Reynolds online and take a look around. This is where you probably have registered for users group, but we have a lot of new content up there, and we'd love you to go out to it and explore it. Also in June 13th through the 16th, Rock Live is coming up. This is more of a Rockwell's hands-on environment. It caters a lot to engineering companies, end users with their own engineering staffs, and SIs. There's going to be lots of labs there. If you get a chance, please attend. And the SIs, I want to make aware, a lot of times have a free seat there. So there, if you're an SI, please inquire about it because you probably can go for free. Oh, OEMs as well. Thank you. Here's some of the things coming up for it. Lots of labs. We're going to look at a lot of the reporting structures. Again, please register if you can. Our presenters today are going to be David Nute and Luis Ramos. They are our business development leads for process. And Brian Mikeska will also be on the line in case we need to answer some questions. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to David Nute. Thank you.
Actually, okay, so we're going to do the PlantPAx update. It's going to be realistically a process update more than anything else, but we are going to touch on Rockwell's DCS platforms. For I think most of you, you've already seen this. PlantPAx has been out for a number of years. Back in October 2020, they did a system release of 5.0. So as part of this, we'll talk about what released at 5.0, some of the updates regarding the process controllers, the introduction of some of the library objects, the tools, the architecture around that. And then we'll do a quick subset on updates for 5.1. That will be coming out in June of this year. So for what we talked about in Rock Live, a lot of those updates will be there in terms of labs and different sessions that you can see on that. And then we'll also go into a little bit more detail around process updates on how we implement the tools, the deployment, implementation of some of the servers. And then at the end, we'll also cover a little bit of the training portion and updates on FactoryTalk View SC in terms of how we're handling process bundles. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to go through. In terms of process, again, when we're talking about process, we're specifically looking at DCS applications. So if we have a DCS, that is when we're going to be promoting PlantPAx more than anything else. But in process, especially in Houston in our industry, we're talking about controller software, the implementation of all of that, a lot of analog signals, HART solutions, and also implementation of power integration and other different utilities that we see. So it's not specific to a DCS platform. So realistically, a lot of the times what we'll see as part of a PlantPAx system are the tools, the libraries, the standardization of all the blocks and objects that we have, tons of documentation around reference architectures, and then also key releases that we have specific to either the process controller or things of that nature. So as we go through, we're going to be talking a lot about PlantPAx, but it's not going to be specific to just that. We can use a lot of these tools outside of that, because in reality, what we're looking at is Compact Logics, Control Logic, Studio 5000, FactoryTalk View, SC, History, and Asset Center. All of those are part of our process system that we'll tie into. When we look at a modern process solution, like I said, we are looking at PlantPAx in the foreground, but as part of that, PlantPAx is a characterized system. So all of the documentation, the tools, the mechanism of how we implement the system, everything has been characterized and documented. So a lot of the tools are built around that. Application code manager being one, so that allows us to do the bulk code instantiation. The instruction sets, so we have the process library that you can import and export, and you also have the new instruction sets that are going to be tied specifically around the newer controllers, how we handle alarming. And then in terms of what we're seeing in the bottom end side, again, integration into power, integration into motor control, the ability of being able to do redundancy. So typically my joke is how much redundancy is too much redundancy. We are seeing that here in the process system where we have redundant controllers, redundant IO, the ability of being able to do redundant switches and servers. It just depends on the application set that we're looking at. And then even safety and the scalability piece is as we go through, we can go and scale this down to a single station solution where it's a single monitor, single controller, all the way through a full control room environment, multiple servers, multiple controllers. We actually have an example architecture at the end, just so you guys can kind of see some of the capabilities. But in terms of what we're looking at for a newer update, as of June, we will have the release for 5.1. So this is a smaller system release update to PlantPAx. When we do the release, what Rockwell does is they'll release also documentation that goes with it. So as I mentioned, it's a characterized system, meaning that they now characterized it to all of the new feature sets and the newer software packages that they're going to be coming out with. Along with that, some of this has already been released. It's just a matter of having that documentation that ties into the process side of it. So last user group, we talked about Logix Echo. So with that, that allows us to do emulation of a process controller. So that'd be the newer high performance control Logix platform, but the process variant that can be emulated inside a Logix Echo. So you wouldn't need the actual controller to be able to do an HMI and code implementation. A couple of the other things that you'll see there, power integration. There's a new ProSoft module that allows you to do the 61850. So usually it's a Schweitzer relay or switchgear kind of communication that ties in directly into the Control Logix platform. Some updates with how we handle OPC UA alarming and security. That'll be built into the documentation. And then what we'll talk about in a little while is also some of the newer updates to the infrastructure. So the virtual templates that we create on the Rockwell side, that will allow you to see what we implement for PAS is Process Automation System Server. So in layman's terms, it's the factory talk view server image. We'll have a consolidated version. The consolidated will also now include batch. So you'll have factory talk view, historian, asset center, and batch all in one virtual image template. You can either do that in a virtual environment or a physical box. As far as, oh, go for it.
Is there any plans to build a 61850 into it, so you don't need the additional ProSoft gateway?
So as far as the 61850 implementation into the controller, essentially what they're doing is having the controller be the master side of it. So they're not planning right now to have the 61850 built directly as a native to the Ethernet IP. But now what this allows you to do is you can connect up to, I think it's 40 to 50 devices on the IED side of it. And because of the fact that it also supports the parallel redundancy, they need to keep it as a separate unit. It could be either in chassis or in a remote chassis. So it doesn't necessarily need the controller right next to it. So the newer ProSoft allows you to do the goose messaging, which is a big push for us, the ability of being able to support more than what the older ProSoft module is. And it's built in chassis. So it sits in the Control Logix chassis. It no longer has to be a DIN rail mount. But yeah, as of right now, I don't think they're planning, and it's just with the amount of processing power that it needs just to be able to be in that kind of circuit, it has to be on a separate system. But yeah, if you're looking at it, or if anybody's interested in that ProSoft module, it is brand new. They have information on the Rockwell website, but we're starting to get some architecture and designs. So for larger systems, especially when you're talking about 40, 50, 60 different devices that you're all tying in, There's a huge amount of literature when it comes to how to keep it all high available. In terms of the process controller, if you guys haven't seen this already, more than likely you probably have. In Compact Logics and Control Logics, this is the newer high performance feature set. There's now a process variant. So this released as a version, I think it was 31. So it was October 2002, I believe. So with these are going to be processed out of the box. A few of the changes that you'll see is they got rid of the continuous task when it comes to process. So the process is typically using periodic tasks. So it also defines the speed of the tasks that are being used. The biggest change that we'll see with a process specific variant is that it has the process instructions built into the firmware. So in terms of the Studio 5000 environment, as soon as you load up the firmware on the controller, you'll actually see a PlantPAx subset of instruction sets that are already built into the firmware. They don't have to be imported or exported outside of that. So when Rockwell creates a PlantPAx 5.0 library set that ties into all of the faceplates and the way that we handle alarming, all of that would be tied into the firmware instruction sets that are already built in. So when they moved from a V33 to a V34, it's part of the firmware update. So there's no library piece that needs to be updated outside of that. Everything is handled as part of the controller. So any future upgrades in the process controller specific, whether it's Compact Logics or Control Logics, is just updated via the firmware. So that is a huge thing. Inside of process, whether we're talking about PlantPAx specific or just process in general, we can still support architectures with an L7 or an L8 standard type controller. But if you are looking for the feature set where you can keep that instruction set that's built into the firmware, it would have to be the process controller. So just keep that in mind. Some of the features that we'll talk about are going to be specific just to the newer controllers, not necessarily to the process controller.
So as more things are added to PAX, that'll be added later firmware.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
Firmware levels are better aligned. So I don't have to say, okay, version 34, what version of PAX is at?
Correct. So
at some point get better recognizable.
Yeah, so the idea with the PlantPAx system releases, so like I mentioned, they released 5.0 as of June. They'll be at 5.1. Part of that characterization is telling you what version of Studio and firmware controller you should be using, including all of the software packages. So when 5.1 rolls out, they'll also do an update to the revision of what controller you should currently be at, including like version 12 or 13 of Factory Talk View SE, Historian. All of those pieces will kind of come bundled in. So what they're planning on doing is any newer releases as we go forward, because what Rockwell will probably do, if I'm seeing the writing on the wall, is they had the 5.0 release, they'll have a 5.1. I fully expect them to have a 5.2 once they have newer updates. So anytime they're trying to release new updates, what they'll do is update the documentation and potentially move that into a new firmware update specific to the process controller. There's a migration path if you have an L7 or an L8 and you want to move that same feature set. But what Rockwell is trying to do is as we get into more of the process or PlantPAx space, they tie that in directly into the firmware releases so that it's an easier transition from moving from one system to another. Go for it.
Is the compact variant going to be in Echo?
Eventually. So Logic's Echo right now is specific to an L8 design for Control Logics. So it doesn't currently have Compact Logics built in and doesn't currently have Guard Logics built in. Both of those are on the roadmap for Echo. It'll be part of an update, and what Echo is doing, which is similar to some of the others, is you're essentially installing the version of the firmware so that you can run that in chassis. So eventually you will see a Compact Logics Echo like variant. Right now they don't have that. So it is on the roadmap, not entirely sure when.
But only for the 5069.
Right, it will only be for the 5380, 5069 family on the Compact Logics. If we're looking at the older design, so the 1769 side of it, we would still use just Logix Emulate and change the emulation and just try to get as close as you can, just so you can test the code. But we won't see that moved over to Echo. So it has to be the high performance version of the Compact Logics. that's what's on the roadmap.
Cause like a silver surge.
Emulator, no, what'll end up happening is the existing Logix Emulate 5000 that exists with Studio 5000, especially if you had the professional version, that will continue, but that the line in the sand there is the L7 or the 1769 family. So as of right now, last I've heard on the Rockwell side is they're going to keep that line separate. So you'll have anything that you're doing into an L7 or the older style controllers, that'll be emulation for that. If you're trying to do the high performance side of it, that'll be the move to Echo. And that is also why they did the licensing change. So as you guys are aware, Logix Echo is a subscription service that you do as a yearly fee versus your typical development that you would do inside of Studio 5000.
It's not in the toolkits.
Right. Correct. So Logix Echo is not in the toolkit. So in case you guys are wondering and you want to yell at us later, it is not. So just be aware of that.
We can issue temporary activations.
Not as of right now. They're the way that Rockwell is moving towards with the Logix Echo specifically is because it's built around being able to do the emulation, and on their side of it, they also use that for when we start talking about like digital twins and more of the analytic versions of it. They are doing as at a subscription, so it won't be part of the toolkit. If you're looking at just being able to play with it, we have access to it. So one of the training options at the very end of this is going to be talking about some of the options for integrators. Echo is actually how Rockwell uses a lot of the cloud-based demos. So it's easy enough to get comfortable with it and use it. But as far as the actual licensing, it won't be in the toolkit. It'll be just a separate purchase. So pretty much covered that one. Oh. There we go. In the newer controllers, this does not have to be specific to the process variant. So this is looking at the 5380 or the 5580 control logic, compact logics. We've talked about this in the past, but it's worth repeating. One of the bigger updates that we've seen as of version 33, 34 for Studio 5000 is the implementation of automatic diagnostics. So what this allows us to do is it's an automatic push from the controller to the HMI. So Factory Talk View SE will automatically get information regarding the diagnostics part of it. It's using the alarm and events portion, but this is essentially just a little checkbox inside of the controller to say enable. It's ADDA, it's automatic diagnostics, something or other. So what that allows us to do is now see broken wire status information, and it's not only the controller status, but it's also the adapter and the IO per channel. So in the past, most of you probably have created some type of get system variable to get the status of an IO card, or created special AOIs just to do that. Now it's built into the system using the newer feature set. So it has to be the newer controllers, and it has to be the newer IO as well. So we're talking Flex 5000, the machine IO, so the 5069 flavor of the IO, all of those are capable of it. You will not see this with the older style IO or the older style controllers. So another reason why when we're looking at modernization, we're trying to push to make sure that you guys are at version 33 or above. It will not work with ME because it requires the alarm and events subscription side of it. So ME is built on a different platform. So it will work if you're looking at a panel view, it will work with a panel view 5000. Adoption in our industry is low for the panel view 5000. So I don't fully expect you to have that out there. But if we're looking at what we're doing there, what we're trying to migrate folks to, especially in a ME environment, is the newer IPCs, so the industrial computer touchscreens that are running Factory Talk View SE. So as part of this, we'll talk about the new bundle set for SE. We're trying, especially where we don't have the class 1 div 2 requirement, if we're able to put something out where it's just an industrial touchscreen, a 15-inch that's running Factory Talk View SE, just a single station, that now allows us to do all the feature sets that we're talking about. And from a price point of view, you're probably on par with what a typical panel view would cost you for that type of interface. So that is something that we have discussion. So if you guys are looking for similar feature set, we might be able to kind of move towards the IPC. So that would be like the VersaView industrial computers that we have.
So with the new HMI running Windows 10 instead of the Windows CE, you still have plans to put that on there?
No, because when they made the change to the PanaView 7, like Series B, where it's now Windows 10 IoT under the hood, that still is using the factory talk view ME station or ME in general. So ME has a alarm summary and alarm builder page, but it doesn't have the full alarm and events tie-in. So that's the benefit on the SE side of it, is that we have the tie-in to the Ethernet IP drivers, the alarm and events server setup that we have, and then how we handle the HMI screens.
Even if you use a new controller, e-controller,
Mhm.
and you use 1734 or 1794, you still not get diagnostic on.
You'll get, so if you use a newer controller with the automatic diagnostics, but you have an older IO set, you will get all of the information outside of the IO. So you won't get, you'll get updates as far as the connection to the IO. So all of that is part of the diagnostics, but the individual channel portion of it will still have to be handled through the AOI.
Individual channel, we have to do it the way we used to do it earlier.
Correct.
Make some set value.
Yeah.
Get the value.
Mhm.
What about this?
Correct. You wouldn't have to do any, you would have to do specific code only if you're using like the older style. Yeah, exactly. So anytime that you're doing the automatic diagnostic, anything that you're doing in the previous side of it, you'd have to kind of do a workaround where you're still writing code or status bits. What you can do is take advantage of the newer Logix alarming feature, and I'll talk about that in a while. What you can do there is even the library objects that we're creating on the Rockwell side, you can now make it so that it's a push alarm from the controller to the HMI. So you don't have to redo that alarming system at the HMI level. So you have that flexibility, but you would still have to go and create that for, let's say, the original Flex versus the Flex 5000. If you get the Flex 5000, that's a huge benefit because at that point it's a checkbox, and now it's subscribing to the system without having to do any additional work. And I promise not to tell the end users that you guys don't have to do extra hours. You can still tell them that you're going to use as many hours as you want. Update on heart. So again, this is got to be specific to process in general. It doesn't have to be specific to PlantPAx, but it's what comes along for the ride. So as they do updates to PlantPAx, we are getting all the new tools, new feature sets. So what they introduced as of V31 and specific to the Flex 5000 family. So again, a new update, new feature set that only exists in the newer technology. When we're looking at Flex 5000 and the newer controllers, so the 5380 and the 5580, this now ties in and they call it highly integrated heart. So we still have the capability of being able to bring in all the heart sensors inside of it. We have specific IO cards that are analog heart modules or analog out heart modules. What this is doing is now the heart integration portion of it is that device is now part of the IO tree. So in the past, you've gone into the IO card, set up the configurations that turn on the heart, and you're getting the process variable along with all the heart variables. It didn't necessarily specify what device was on the other end. You would have to use something like Asset Center or an AMS system. What they're doing now is inside of Studio 5000, in the IO tree, you would actually get a full listing of all the devices that are being tied to it. The devices themselves will come with an add-on profile, so you can double click on it and you'll get a full little window. Eventually, it'll get to the point where it's doing the same thing that Asset Center was doing, where you can see a full device manager inside of Studio 5000. That's the goal. Right now, they're implementing this only for Flex 5000. Eventually, this will get rolled into Compact or ControlLogix IO for those analog signals. But as we do the integration into the IO tree, then we also have those process instructions that I was talking about that are specific either to the process controller. There's a mechanism to be able to do this with the existing process library that you just download off our the Rockwell website. And then that library then translate into how it looks on the actual HMI side of it. So we have tie-in to be able to see the visualization piece of it, the alarming, how we historize, all of that information is now part of your control system. So just easier utilities that you can use. And if you want to, you can build this into the application code manager. So it makes all the upfront work for you. So you don't have to do all the nitty gritty work of tying in all the sensors and tie-ins. Everything would be done for you. Another feature that we typically have not covered, and it's something that anybody that's doing either PlantPAx systems or just a process system in general, as we move towards integration into FactoryTalk View, what we're also looking is the ability of being able to own and organize based on equipment design. So a lot of the times what we're in a process environment, we're doing a lot of loop tuning. So you have dependencies from a valve, a motor, a block, those analog signals. What you can now do is implement an actual organization structure that's built into the HMI itself once it's all there. So if you have any dependencies on something needs to start up before you get an alarm somewhere else, you can now do that arbitration and do it directly from the FactoryTalk View SE system. So that is built into the tools as part of PlantPAx. Again, it could either be part of a full DCS environment for a larger system, or you can just be looking at this from a controller to HMI system with FactoryTalk View as a full process implementation. So documentation is already there. If you guys need to kind of do some labs or get in a little bit more information on it, just let us know.
Sometimes this is used in some regulated industries where you have to provide some kind of documentation about arbitration or about ownership, like in pharmaceutical and those kinds of things. If you're familiar with the S95 documentation standard, that's what this allows you to follow easily. So it may not be so much in oil and gas, but in some of the regulated chemical industries and pharma, you might see this. And so it just helps in the organization of your HMI development.
And if you, again, plugging application code manager, a lot of this is built into that. So because of the fact that you can do standard structures on how it's all coded, that could be done once, kind of do that implementation, and then makes it easier once you're doing the top end side. As far as implementation, if you guys are following PlantPAx letter of the law, there are documents that you are fully expected to read. I won't actually ask you if you did, because I don't want to get sad. But there's documents in here. So anytime they do a system release, as I mentioned, so there was a 5.0, there's a 5.1 selection guide, configuration and implementation user manual, and then also a full listing when it comes to the library objects. This is going to be specific either to the instruction sets that are built into the process controller or to the library that exists outside of the process controller that you can import or export. So that provides you all of the information, a lot of the documentation that you can get into. One of the examples that we get into is if anyone starts asking about how do we set up security inside of process or PlantPAx specifically, usually what we see from Rockwell is a following with the IEC 62443. Specifically on this one, it's the 3-3 compliance. So this is how we actually implement the system. So when we're looking at how do we handle access control, the zoning, the conduits, the tie-in for the implementation of FactoryTalk security, all of that is documented inside of that same document that I mentioned. There's a little appendix A, which is a PlantPAx security certification. So you can go in there and it gives all of the examples and what you're supposed to tie into, even how you're supposed to set up some of the networking devices. So it's documented, it's there. So anytime you guys are looking at it or a customer is asking about it, this is where we would go on the Rockwell side. As far as typical workflow for any process system, typically, especially on the Reynolds side. So if the specialist or our group is asked, hey, we need a quota system or we're looking at something, typically we're always going to start with the user requirements. We will quickly move this to the process system estimator. So inside of IAB, the integrated architect builder, we have that free utility to be able to size a system, check to see if we're doing anything wrong, and then also get a full bill of material. The process system estimator wizard allows us to properly size a full process system. So this will take in, are you doing redundancy? How many clients do you have? How many historical points? How many alarms? So typically in process, what we're looking at is not only just hard IO points, That's how we typically start sizing the system. So we know how many cabinets, how many drops we're going to have. This also takes into account sizing when it comes to CPU and memory utilization on the controller for how much data are we sending through that system. How many operators, how many alarms, how many historical points are we planning on doing? How fast are you going to be scanning the system? All of that is taken into account. So when you don't want to read these guys, everything's built into the actual tools. So that's the first thing that we typically do. And anytime we are looking at a system integrator that is doing a full PlantPAx 5.0 system, that is one of the main requirements, that it has to go through the process system estimator and have that fully documented. Once we get that, we have the bill of material, we can go into a proposal, and then we go through the system of how we're going to order everything. Same thing when we look at this. So that allows us to define hardware. It's not only the controller, but it's also the networking piece, the software that goes with it, and even the server configurations. So if you're thinking of doing a full virtual system with thin manager, thin clients, a bunch of remote sessions, all of that would be documented as part of the bill of material, including how we would go about putting a network together. So just be aware that it's probably a little bit more powerful than you're used to. On the integration side of it, we also have configuration tools that are specific to PlantPAx. So again, you can use those for your standard process design. These are how we would set up the interlocks, how we set up the alarms. And then at the end of a system, once the work is done and you're getting to the point where you're doing a FAT test, a SAT test, you can actually go in and there's tools in terms of PlantPAx and process for a verification validation tool. So these are, I think last I checked, is about 8 spreadsheets that allow you to tie into the control system to make sure that everything that you said you were going to do in the estimator actually came through, as far as how you did the design, how you did the system, and make sure that you're green across the board, essentially. So if you haven't seen those and you are doing a process or a PlantPAx system, I urge you to get that. They're in the same spot where all the drawings are. So that documentation at the beginning part of it, there's a little link that allows you to pull down a little verification tool via the knowledge base. One update that came out as a part of PlantPAx, and it's a big one when it comes to how Rockwell is implementing their systems, is there's now what's called a system ID. So if we're looking at a full process system, typically the support structure for Rockwell was, okay, you have controllers, you have switches, you have software, everything is separate. So you call in for support and you're calling against a specific device. So what they're moving towards, especially in a PlantPAx DCS environment, is to have a unique identifier for the entire system. So when the call in for support, it's tied into the entire system. They know everything that's there. To get to that point, we use the process system estimator, pull that into proposal work so that we have a tie-in. There's a bundle that gets purchased through the software portal. It's going to be specific to PlantPAx, so it's PlantPAx software bundle. And the unique identifier will be the serial number for the process automation system server. So which is, again, FactoryTalk View SE. There are mechanisms to be able to take older systems, move them to newer systems and get a system ID. There's also ways of being able to buy everything piecemeal and still have a system ID, but you have to go through steps to make sure that happens. Typically, what we're trying to do is any newer system that's going out, if it's PlantPAx, you buy the bundle, you go through all the steps, you get it audited afterwards. But what the system ID allows you to do is this will have the My Equipment portal on the Rockwell side. So they'll have a full layout of everything that you have, including all the bill of material that is found. It's using Asset Center. So it's the asset inventory. If you guys have seen that feature set, essentially that gets tied into the system. When you buy the bundle Asset Center, the asset inventory is going to be part of it. You scan out, you grab everything that's really there, you send that up to Rockwell as part of the design. You now get obsolescence, life cycle information, any product notices. If you're a system integrator and this goes to the end user, you can get signed up so that you can help manage their system and you get access to their information. So if you're a partner with them, all they have to do is add you to the list.
Yearly service contract on the system ID.
So what they're doing is they're tying this into the My Equipment, and then it will be rolled into their kind of Tech Connect agreement that they were. Yes. So once they have that, the idea there is any patch notifications, vulnerability information, lifecycle information will be updated, but they would keep that in terms of a system approach versus an individual device.
Then how do they push that update notification?
So
It's gonna be automated.
yes, so what'll end up happening is once they have the My Equipment access, similar to how they handle kind of Tech Connect or even like a toolkit for a system integrator, there's usually individuals that are tied in via an email access on who gets access. There's going to be the ability of being able to subscribe via like email notifications. You can go online to see it. And then again, if you're a system integrator and you're tied in supporting an end user and they provide you access, you can also then request email access or just going into the portal.
The actual system doesn't have to connect to the portal.
Correct. No. Yeah. So anything that's happening there, it doesn't have to be a live connection to the system. So it's a upfront load all the information in, and Rockwell is working towards making it so that you can do internal changes. So the end user or the system integrator can go in and make modifications. So let's say you swap something out a year later. So they're going through that process, trying to understand what they're doing. Right now, the upfront work is either an install base evaluation or the asset inventory from Asset Center. And these are just some of the reports that they're going to be able to do. If anybody's done an install base evaluation in the past, it's very similar to that, but it's now going to be digital. So you'll have access to it as a living document instead of just a static document that they used to do. We kind of talked about this during the last user group, but we do have an update as part of Factory Talk View SC version 13 release. As of the update with version 13, they updated the pricing and the bundles that we have access to. So inside of Software Portal, this is already reflected. But what they've done is they've introduced Station Light and Station as a bundle. Essentially what that's allowing you to do is now all of the Viewpoint connections are free. So as of version 13, unlimited web access using Viewpoint. So now you can buy a single station. So it's single box solution all in one with multiple connections into a web page. So you can either do that via phone, tablet, or computer desktop. But you still have the option for 25, but we're looking at less than 5,000 for those list price. So you can get the updated there. If you have version 11 or version 12, the free Viewpoint exists for those as well. There's a patch that you grab off the PCDC or knowledge base. So if you guys are doing and supporting customers that have those versions on there, they don't have to upgrade to version 13, but they do have to install the patch. And at that point, they can start turning in and using Viewpoint.
I just got SC station, I guess 1.5 months ago, with 3.SE.
So if it was a month and a half ago, you probably missed the cutoff, but so there is something. So let's talk account managers and Rockwell. We should be able to kind of return that. So there is a program that they have in place for anybody that's purchased recently, where if you don't need it anymore, they'll see about crediting or do something. Okay. Yeah, we'll get that taken care of. Yeah, so and basically what this is trying to do is anything in the Factory Talk View SE world, specifically around Viewpoint, is making it so that it's now fully featured. So you don't have to spend extra when you're trying to do a lot of the mobile portions of it. So, you know,
Customer need only 3 clients, that's what we
yeah.
point, and it's internal, they don't need to do this on internal with this kind of
Exactly.
network, and that's what it was. I didn't know about this.
See, if you would have come to our user group last time, you would have found out about it.
1.5 months.
Yeah, I know that was my last one. So this kind of goes back to the conversation I was saying about the industrial computer side of it. This is why we're trying to promote having a bundle with an industrial computer with SE instead of potentially an ME station like we have in the past, because of the way that we're doing the pricing and the fact that an unlimited count now gives you multiple Viewpoint clients, to your point. What we're also seeing in a server client environment, we used to only have the bundle with the 10 count. So now what we're seeing is, so we have the medium bundle here is the same. So you get 10 fully featured clients, unlimited server, the option to add redundancy servers. So you can still do a fully featured system. But you can do now a small system that only has 5 clients, or you can do a large system that has 25 clients. So we are seeing a huge jump. They have also changed the pricing for the development license for Studio Enterprise. So as you see that, everything's been reflected again on the portal. But this makes it a lot easier to get in as far as how we're interfacing with development if you have to leave a license with the end user. And what we'll see at the PlantPAx side of it is, as of June, when 5.1 releases for the system release, they will see updates to this. You will now see a full subscription bundle for perpetual and subscription. So you can do either or, depending on what the customer is looking at, whether it's CapEx or OpEx, but we will support the same licensing structure that they now introduced with V13. So you'll have a small, medium, and large client-based solution for the bundle. The bundles include FactoryTalk View SE and Asset Center, the base model with the asset inventory. So that will allow us to do the full system ID solution at a customer site. So when we start talking about a full PlantPAx system, we are looking at those 3 software packages more than anything else. We're talking about FactoryTalk View, all of the development software that you might do, along with Asset Center. Those are almost key pieces that we have to have as part of a PlantPAx 5.0 system. But also keep in mind that we, one of the example architectures, we are looking at how we handle reporting, how we handle historical information. So all of that is also part of the puzzle that we want to make sure that we're covering when we're talking process. Any questions? Yeah, go. Mhm. You mean it's cheaper? For so right. So if you're talking about a panel view, let's say 7/15" the price point comparison versus the somewhat equivalent on a PC side of it is almost the same. Yeah, because the other thing, a PC itself, what was that? Including the license. Now, that's not including the development license, but you kind of have that as part of your toolkit. I'm going to make the judgment for people that are on the line. So what happens is you'll see the industrial computers are actually usually at a lower price point than a standard panel view. The thing that we have to keep in mind in our industry is a PC doesn't have the certifications that we do on the panel view. So the panel views are still there when it comes to class 1 div 2. That is our mainstay. So I don't want to take away from that. But when we don't have to deal with class 1 div 2, a full industrial computer is in most cases going to be at a lower price point than a panel view. On top of that, you do have to layer in the cost of the SE side of it. But with the new bundles, it's almost comparable when we layer the two together. Again, not having to take into account any of the development software or anything that's done. And any ME applications that we're running, we can automatically add into SE as a automatic conversion. So there's not a lot of extra work that needs to be done. And if we can move a lot of the alarming functionality into the controller, so the SE system is an automatic, that's another thing. But I'm not going to say it's always going to be more or less, but it is getting to the point where we can kind of get a little competitive on that. So if that is something that we need to move, and especially right now, panel views and industrial computers are a little bit better on the supply chain side of it. And I should have just left that out. But that is something that potentially we can look at if it's an option. no idea on dates. But they are looking at XT lineups for the panel view side and also for the industrial computer side.
I will say this is one of the few examples where we can say that the pricing has gone down for the same software, especially the station light is a pretty significant price reduction if you're only doing 25 displays.
Mhm.
So it's different than most, bundles. I mean, they recognize the market and the need for reducing price. So they've, wrong way.
So one question that came up is on the light stations at the standard PX optics count towards a display.
Yes, if we're looking at just a 25 display count, typically when we're bringing in the process library or the even the library that exists for the instruction sets, we're at a count of about 80 faceplates. Granted, you don't have to use them all. So if it's a smaller application set, you can get rid of anything that's not being used, but you have to do that extra work and you have to understand whether or not you can fit that in a 25. I will be honest, if we're talking PlantPAx or even some of the process systems, I almost always want you to be unlimited. So take a look at the pricing that's been updated, because in most cases, the unlimited is still at an extremely competitive price point now with the update on it. But yeah, if you're at 25 displays, everything that you add to it, anything that's a faceplate, anything that's a trending screen, a navigation screen, all of that goes against your count. If you're doing the, we'll define stackable, you're talking about like by two? No, because essentially the SE still doesn't let you do an additive piece, so you can't just add display counts. So if you were to buy 2 station lights, you're essentially asked to be installing that on 2 separate PCs.
Right.
So you would have to split the system. So let's say you had 2 panel views and you split the system so they're doing independent items. You can do that as a cost piece, but there's probably some screens that you're going to have to reuse anyway. So ultimately, you might be cheaper going with the SE station, the full, and doing the thin client like the web page viewpoint portions for anything outside of the need of the one. So.
Okay.
It's gone.
It's gone, but if you look at the unlimited station count of price is probably similar. Yes, both of those station prices went down. And then the ones in the middle got eliminated.
Yeah, if you think about it, so the small SE, so the 5 client, I think you're less than 11,000. The station light, you're both under 5,000 for those. So it's gotten very competitive, and that's the main reason why they got rid of the middle ground, because you can't imagine the number of issues that we've had to Jonathan's point of, oh, I only need 5 other displays, but I bought the 100 and I need 110. All of a sudden, the only option is to do a full replacement and do a 250 display. Or you bought the 15 or the 25 and you need 10 more. So now I got to bump you to 100. And the only way to get around that was to completely return the software and buy a new software package. So I personally would have gotten rid of the station light, but I know there's options out there where we have a small little system and we need to be able to put that out there. But everything else is moved unlimited because of the more of the pain point. So they just dropped the price and made it so that you can kind of go and do what you need to without having to worry so much about how many graphics you're creating.
Then the maintenance costs have changed too, right?
Correct. So
So-
you're now only paying support fees for the server and the station, not the clients.
So that's a big change really in your total cost of ownership. So in the past, if you bought, say, a View distributed with 10 clients, you paid support for the 10 clients, even though maybe you use 3 clients. Well, Rockwell's changed that again, one of the few times where prices go down. Now you're really just paying maintenance on the server, and the clients are just kind of part of the server cost. So they kind of rolled that into the server cost as far as maintenance goes. So you should see a lower cost of ownership kind of down the line for View SE.
So if somebody has an under display AC station, not already to this time, it's going to unlimited display count. That's an AC station, right?
Yeah, there's only 2 SE stations now going forward, either unlimited or 25. Now the older ones are will stay grandfathered in. Yeah,
You say all of this is inside your development technology.
that's right. Yeah, so if I mean, honestly, if you're doing a PlantPAx, I wouldn't even think about the station light. You'd have to go with this with a unlimited display count if that's going to be on a PlantPAx system.
Yeah, the smallest I've seen a PlantPAx system survive is probably 100 display, because you're usually accounting for at least 40 to 50 faceplates, trends, navigation screens, and then you can kind of all the fun feature sets that you can do when it comes to parameter tag, parameter passing, reusing the display over again as much as you can. You're probably still going to hit that top end mark one way or another. And all of a sudden, 2 years down the road, your customer wants to add a couple of screens and you're out and you need a new license. So have that discussion with them about the total cost of ownership, what they're planning on doing as far as spares. And realistically, we're going to be looking at that 25 display count for small little systems that are non-process. So if you got something in the process space, it's probably easier just going unlimited.
Does any station come with the Viewpoint licenses?
ME station does not. The panel view side of it does come with Viewpoint still built in. But if you're looking at ME, actually, no, that's not true. ME station does include Viewpoint the same way that the panel views do. Sorry, there's a knowledge base article that you can grab. So essentially, any of our HMIs now have the capability of doing Viewpoint unless it's the panel view 5000.
Yeah.
So no
Okay.
excuses.
Any questions on licensing? I know that's if you only remember one thing from today, is probably it. So,
They're no longer available.
Not really. So if we needed to get tricky, we can probably ask for it, and there's a Rockwell guy there, so we can force him to do it. But you're gonna pay the old pricing if you try to get the older versions of it. So our biggest piece is anything new going forward, just let's do the newer bundles.
What's approximate lease price of a new AC station?
I'm sorry, what?
Approximate lease price.
I don't remember. For SC Station Unlimited,
It was
is it 3?
Unlimited, the 5.
the station one.
On the station.
The question is the station pricing for
View
the
SE
25
station
display and the
unlimited
unlimited.
cost.
If somebody just go on this portal and look it up, Mike,
6,000-7,000.
Oh, it's less than that.
it's less than that. It's gone down. And like, I want to say the 25 display is like less than 1,500 now.
Mhm.
1,100,
The server
$1,200.
cost for the 5 display is about 10.
Yeah. But yeah, that's something that's published. It's published right now on, on the portal. We just need to go back and look it up. It's gone down quite a bit on this
They're
go
still
around.
around Windows 10, right?
Yes.
Not even talk about
Right. I actually think they made it available, but there's almost nothing else that supports 11. So yeah, everything's 10.
It's just under 2,000 for the light bundle.
Okay.
And 4,500
For the unlimited.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I want to say the unlimited used to be over 6. Yeah, so it's quite a bit of difference. So, quick.
25 is the, I guess, 2 months back. And cost me around 6.
That doesn't sound right.
Yeah, because that would have been the
For
older
25
pricing.
But for a 25 display,
In the previous side
I
of
don't
it,
know. We should, yeah, we can take that offline after we've got some folks online that, but we can figure that out, I think. because that doesn't sound, yeah, that sounds.
You're
a
gonna
little
always
off.
lunch though.
Yeah. So anyway, we're going to change subjects a little bit and talk about, so we'll talk about graphics, graphic frameworks and how that works with PlantPAx 5.0, but also with process systems in general. So a little background, about graphics and things. In the very early days of, automation, the graphic panels were dedicated units, right? So you had a panel view that had really basic graphics, or in a DCS in the control room, you had operator stations that had, lines drawing from boxes and circles and just very simple graphics because it was very expensive to do graphics, right? And then 25 years ago, when Windows proliferated in the industrial space, all of a sudden people were making applications that ran on Windows. So you had the full color palettes, you had the ability to make fancy graphics like we all know and love, and so those types of applications just started proliferating through the industrial space. So you had 3D tanks and 3D pipes, and every time a different material would go through a pipe, you could change the color of it and all kinds of things. Everybody thought that was great. I thought it was great back then, and so. But more recently, there's been some questions about the efficiency and really the safety of operating in an environment where you have 15 or 20 different colors on the screen, and how fast can an operator react to an anomaly or to an emergency situation when you have all that busyness on the screen. And so after a lot of research and things, there was an ISA group formed, and it's called ISA 101, that have actually come out with recommended designs for HMI graphics. And so Rockwell has adopted those, and built a lot of, built the product and built a lot of the framework and graphics around that standard. And so what that does is that improves operator situational awareness, so you can operate a better facility in a more efficient way and a safer way. Also, it's easier to troubleshoot for some things I'll talk about. So when there's an actual problem, that's when you want to grab the attention of the operator. So how do you do that in the right way? So those kind of things have been sort of researched and developed and available to you in the PlantPAx system. So a little bit about ISA 101 that we've adopted. There's really sort of four main components to a operator screen. So you have a header at the top that's always there, that has some navigation buttons. Also has would have a small little alarm banner, and then you have the main window. You have different process control displays, and we'll talk about the kind of layers and how many of those there are. But the idea is you have a common header that gives you basic information at the top. You have easy navigation up there, and you have alarm indication wherever you are in some form or fashion. So that's kind of the basics of how to do an ISA 101 graphical system. And we're seeing customers, end users, OEMs, et cetera, that are recognized the significance of this, and this is driving some migrations and opportunities, because they're recognizing that maybe their facilities are not run in the most efficient or safest way they could. And so we're seeing a lot of customers adopt this ISA 101. So as far as the process screens go, you've got kind of four levels or four layers. And so we'll talk about level one first. That would be your overview screen. And if you can see the biggest octagon there, on an overview screen, you don't have any graphic. So you really, what you have is data, and you want to be able to display a high level amount of data, and a data that an operator can look at and maybe see an anomaly or see a situation that might be bad or might beginning to be bad. And so the research says that trends are good visual tools to show an operator what's normal So you have a trend that would be in a kind of a normal band, and then you have sort of abnormal bands. And then these are typically real-time trends. They go back, a certain amount of time, maybe 10 minutes, maybe an hour, depending on the process. So an operator can look at that trend and say, oh, that doesn't look like it normally does. Let me click on it. And then you can go into a deeper or more focused screen. And that's what we call the level 2 or the main control screen. And so the main control screen is going to have very basic pictures of the unit. So that could be a distillation column, a separator, it could be a reactor, whatever. And so you see that in the middle there, the main control. So in the main control, you might be looking at a particular process unit. So you've got a few pieces of equipment there. Again, trend is available on that level as well in a couple different ways, but you also have some numbers to show. And then if if one of the pieces of equipment you want to dive into more, there's another level that would be level 3, and that's a detailed display. So a level 3 display would be maybe a single separator or a column or a single reactor inside of that unit. And then inside there, then you can get to, that piece of equipment might have pumps, it might have agitators, it might have valves. And that's in that level 3 display, you would be able to select each of those individual pieces of equipment that an operator can change a set point to, turn on, turn off, et cetera. And then finally, we have our faceplates. And so that's where PlantPAx comes in, is the faceplates are standard. So based on whether it's a valve or whether it's a PID, whether it's a control valve, a flow, whether it's a solenoid valve, we have different common faceplates for all those different activities. And so those are all standard. And then inside the faceplate, you can do normal operation, but you can also do maintenance, you can also do engineering, and you can also do troubleshooting based on the different tabs. And then that all can be, secure, put different security levels based on what you're doing. You may want an operator to operate maybe a control valve, but maybe you want an engineer to be able to change the tuning parameters. So that same faceplate would be used to do both, but then there might be a security level to get to the engineering tab that would get you to the PID tuning parameters. But the idea here is that almost all the activity that's involved with the control system can be accessed through the graphic. So, and not have to go into, say, Studio 5000 and go in and look at code. That should be reserved for a special case for engineers that are making code changes or whatever. We try to get the troubleshooting to be done in the graphics. So that's the idea of this whole graphic framework. So operate and maintain and engineer all in the graphic. So just a couple more things about the framework. One concept that we call breadcrumbs is a really interesting thing. And do you notice here on our different level 2 and 3 indicators, you've got little red dots. So on a process screen, a breadcrumb, an alarm breadcrumb would be something. So if we go back, most of these screens are, some kind of shade of gray. So there's not a lot going on. But if you notice, if you have a red boxes or yellow boxes, indicate something's happening there. So a red would be something, maybe a high alarm. And so you'd want to be able for that operator to just basically simple as select the buttons where the red lights are on, and that's going to take you to where the problem is. And so that's the concept of what we call breadcrumbs. And so this is all built in to PlantPAx and how the faceplates and the instructions work. And so this is just something that gets configured as you develop your HMI package.
A cool little feature, but it's not something that you normally think about, is when you're looking at the navigation side of it, the little bars that you see, the black bars, are actually telling you what level you're currently in and what screen you're currently in. So when you're seeing the entire graphic framework, not only are you seeing the breadcrumbs of any alarms or any actionable items, but you can actually quickly see what actual area and screen you're currently at when we're looking at those different levels that David was talking about. So all of that is built into what Rockwell created, and it's all available for you, including all the documentation. So it's not anything that you have to create.
Right, right. And so certainly alarms, alarm management is a critical piece to the ISA 101. So like we showed in the beginning, the top area here, you're always going to have the banner, you're always going to have a small 3 row alarm banner on top of every screen. So again, if there's something red, if there's a red circle up there, something you might want to investigate further. So you could click on that and then get to your full alarm summary here. And then the alarm summary, you can do all kinds of things and manage your alarms that way. So trending. So we've with View SE, this is not just a PlantPAx feature, but within View SE, there's in the last few releases, there's been a lot of enhancements done to trending. And so this trend, this is a typical process analog trend here, where you're looking at some analog values over time. But notice there's a lot more information here as well. So with the trending tool in View SE and PlantPAx, you can layer events on top of your process data. So, and that's not just, and so that could be alarms. That could also be diagnostics. So Luis talked about automatic diagnostics that are now available through FactoryTalk Alarm and Events. You could layer, hardware IO diagnostics on top and be able to look at it on a display screen. So if you had a transmitter that was out of whack, that went off, maybe that diagnostic would show you there on the screen, oh, I lost this point. I need to go in and change my IO module or something. So the ability to be able to layer event data on top of historical process data, I think is a nice feature. So you don't have to go hunt and peck in and somewhere else to troubleshoot what's going on with the system. So that came in I think in version 11 was when that first started, and now we're on version 13. And then I think maybe version 12, it had the ability to layer asset center information on top of this. So within asset center, your change management tool, if maybe somebody made a change or there was an audit or something, that information that's stored in asset center can also be accessed, layered on top of the trend. So there's a lot of information here that can be able to put in one spot. Analytic reports. So, Rockwell has a whole suite of analytic tools that are compatible with PlantPAx and with our controllers in general. That's probably a topic for another whole user group, but there's a whole series, way to get data to the cloud, get it to different analytic tools that Rockwell offers. And so one of those would be to do some reports. Analytic reports. There's a couple of different ways to create those. We fully support SQL report services. We also, in our process historian, support use the asset framework inside of the historian to build reports. Third-party options as well from our process or business partners out there. A lot of ways to do that. This is just some screenshots. One of the things that Rockwell came up at the last fall was to add another analytic option to your historian, and we call that Historian Vision, which is really a brand label of Pi Vision, if you're familiar with Pi. So that's a whole other analytic set of tools that will communicate directly to the FactoryTalk Historian SE. What's nice about these is they are sort of client agnostic, so you could run Historian Vision on a PC. You could also run it on a tablet or Apple or Droid device, and look at reporting and trending and that kind of thing. So that's just another tool that is now in our suite to do analytics. So this slide here just gives you an idea of, excuse me, of an option of doing reports. Let me grab some tea here.
Yeah, so if you're looking at this one, I'll take over while you drink. So in terms of process, PlantPAx, when we're looking at the process controllers, obviously that's not going to be specific to just process, but we're looking at all the ways that we can pull out the tags, all the alarms, the capabilities there. So the PAS server, again, that's process automation system server. It's a fancy way of saying the HMI server, the Factory Talk View SE. We have Historian, Asset Center. All of those are separate databases, alarm and events from a historical side of it, your historian trend information, the audit logs that David was talking about. So now we have a way of being able to tie all of that in using SQL. So the same reports that he showed where it had a couple of screenshots, that's already pre-built for you. So if you're using the library, the templates, the tools that Rockwell is providing, all of the reports are now created for you. So they're all part of a full system. So as we incorporate everything, you're seeing the alarm information, the historian, asset center, and then you can also do calculated tags using asset framework. So one of the things that Rockwell does is that they also create the data mapping. So as you're creating pumps, motors, valves, you can now group all of that information. So when you create a report, you're pulling up information that's associated to those data points. Instead of having to drag and drop on a trend like you're used to, customers can already have specific reports based off the models that are already created.
And so this is, one example of viewing reports. There's other things you can do. That this would be more of an on-premise process system. If you did, we're starting to see now some adoption of cloud connectivity to store data or maybe to do some analytics offsite. Typically, we would connect the SQL Server to a cloud somehow, whether that would be a Microsoft Azure connection or something like that. We also have the ability to go even although as far back from here is with our Edge gateway to actually put some of that data into a contextual format down at the process controller and then push it up through to the cloud. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. This is just one option. And so this is just a reminder of a PlantPAx and a process system is almost as much as a data aggregator and a data congregator and a data analyzer. Then that's really a key part of it, in addition to the process controllers and HMIs and things like that. So server deployment. So those of you that are familiar with PlantPAx already know that back in 4.x, we released a consolidated process automation system server. So that's for smaller applications. So that is for a system that has certainly less than 2,000 IO points, but doesn't have a lot of clients. Maybe a small application, could be, a skid or an OEM type of system as well. But you can put a lot of that functionality into one box. And so you can see there from the graphic, it is limited to no more than 5 clients and the small number of IO points or smaller number. There also is, I think, maybe in 5.1, the idea to have a pass C plus batch. That's not quite available yet. If you do batch, you have to go back to the big system. This is just a way to try to get into that smaller footprint without so much software and servers running in the background. So to do the pass C, one of the nice hardware options that you would have would be to use the Stratus ZTC Edge. And so those are edge servers. So they're designed to run in the process. So harsh applications, you can see there, they've got heat sinks, no fans, fanless servers. Stratus is kind of a leader in redundant or highly available servers. So they typically, their larger servers are also kind of like this design where you have a primary and secondary redundant, you have a redundant node next to it. It handles all the handshaking and whatnot. But this is a nice option for a smaller system that's going to sit out at the process, needs to be industrially hardened, et cetera. So the ZTC Edge is good for about 4 virtual images. So typically on an application like this, you'd set up the ZTC Edge with a hypervisor, and then run up to about 4 different VMs to handle the pass, the pass server, and then thin clients, and maybe a engineering workstation if you needed it.
Looking at a scalable solution, Stratus also allows you to buy a single node and then buy the partner for it later. So if your customer doesn't know whether or not they care about fault tolerance or a high availability system, but they do want to take advantage of a full process system, the RDS, or the thin manager piece of it, allows you to do the thin clients. You can now do the viewpoint stuff that we were talking about. So for a very scaled down solution, you can put everything in one box, stick it inside of the panel, and then mount a couple of your tablets or monitors that are tied into this.
Yeah. Okay. And so on the other side of the spectrum, this is a diagram of kind of the large, how big can PlantPAx get? So this diagram kind of has a lot to it. On the top end, we've got all the clients. So you could have up to, I think that's 120 different VUSE clients would be the largest client-based system we offer. And that's along with 10 pass servers. So that's translates to about 1 million points or 1 million tags, about 100,000 tags per pass server is where we feel comfortable with. And again, we may have mentioned it earlier, but the thing about PlantPAx is when we put these numbers out here, it means we've actually tested them, we've characterized them. So we can feel confident that yes, Rockwell has tested a PlantPAx with 120 clients, with 10 servers, with 50 ControlLogix controllers. So you get a lot of information back and forth. And so this is what it comes out to be. So yeah, we're looking at 75,000 alarms. You could
25,000 system. with
Yeah, I
120
think-
clients.
Yeah, I thought I saw it. So maybe I didn't see it, but yeah, I think Rockwell will say we can do up to about 25,000. Yeah, here's 25,000 IO points is pretty much where, as far as we've tested and feel comfortable advertising.
So on this one, where would be the vantage point? Will it be part of the voting server?
So it would be so that would be the reporting server. So on a PlantPAx, and one thing they don't show here is they don't show batch, because batch uses SQL, but Asset Center, batch if they had it, and also the Historian asset framework, all those tools use SQL Server to store their configuration or their setup information or whatever. So on a larger PlantPAx, you set up, I think we call it an information server or something, or system server, which is basically a SQL server, dedicated SQL. So if you had Vantage Point would probably reside on there, but also Vantage Point would be connected to SQL. Asset Center would be connected to SQL. Batch, if you use it, would be connected to SQL, but it's all in the same, it's all being handled by the domain and the FactoryTalk directory, all the communications and
So
whatnot.
Rockwell is providing from the virtual templates, you have one that's dedicated to a domain controller, you have one that's dedicated to SQL, and then you can get one of each type. It also allows you to do a Windows 10 box for just an engineering workstation or operator workstation, but then you can do an engineering application server, which is meant more for like a remote desktop solution. So if you see on the drawing, you have an operator application server and an engineering application server. Those are sized and documented for up to 5 sessions with Studio 5000 or up to 10 sessions with View Client. That could be either via Thin Manager, Thin Client, or you can just connect a PC and just pull in from it. So you have the ability of kind of sizing the system. And all we're doing is as you grow, you just drop another image. So when it's a full virtual environment, we have Stratus as an option. We have the industrial data center on the other side, or you can kind of piecemeal and do a server rack setup for the customer, depending on what they're looking for.
So one of my customers, they have a virtual network where they have, but the way we set it up was practical directory one, OS one, HMI OS, server, third historian, and the fourth project. They want similar system to the other plant. You're still in discussion with them. So I was trying to understand what's the upgrade that I need to take care of. If we go with the pass C or any of that, so will it reduce my images that we need, or still the images will be same?
So if you're able to what David showed, where it has up to 2000 like physical IO points. Yeah, so if you kind of hit all of the pieces for the consolidated pass, at that level, you can take off, I think it's about 4 images that you would typically have to deal with, where what he showed right now with that ZTC Edge, you were down to 3 images. There was a domain controller, the pass C, which has everything consolidated in one, and then one application server for the thin client portion of it. So your entire solution set gets knocked down to basically 3 images that would be able to run on the Stratus server. They have different sizes. So depending on the application set, I think there is a 2.
Because they have one that's 64
Yeah,
gigs of RAM.
200, 210 or
Oh,
250.
250, okay. I guess the 110 might be 32.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so you
so-
got,
Yeah,
so you
Yeah.
can do up to 64 gigs of memory now. So on one of these systems, and you can still buy multiple nodes. So really heavy, especially in the oil and gas market, the class 1 Div 2 certification exists on these. And like I said, you can buy them in a single node. So smaller scaled solutions, look at the
Yeah.
consolidated pass. If you have a toolkit, you have access to the image set already. It comes as an ISO file, so it is a little different. Typically, the virtual templates are a universal file that you can add to VMware or somewhere else. In the consolidated pass, it's an ISO file that you download. You can use that file in a virtual system. So there's documentation on Stratus on how to do it, or the Rockwell knowledge base. But as you grow it, the key piece that you're going to look at is this is going to work for process in general. So it doesn't have to be a PlantPAx solution to be able to use either this setup or even the larger setup that we're looking at. So what David was showing is it scales based on what the customer is asking for. We're going to use that process system estimator to get here, no matter which size you're doing, whether it's a small scale or large. So anytime somebody asks, okay, what's the server requirements for X? We're probably going to pull that from the PlantPAx reference manager, because all of that has been now fully tested. You can always vary based on the application set, but the documentation is there so that we can take advantage of it for any type of process system.
okay, so I think we're getting towards the end, but one thing we wanted to cover was what is available to you guys as, you know, as partners, as users, et cetera, mostly for partners. But so Rockwell, as for quite a while now, has a website called Rockwell University, or RAU. And so, but up until this point, mostly that was available for Rockwell employees and also like distributor partners like Reynolds. That's where we did a lot of our competency training, learning about different things, et cetera. Rockwell is starting to extend that now a little bit more. So our system integrator community partners now have access to it to do some of the competency training that Rockwell is now asking of system integrators to reach levels in the system integrator program. So there's bronze, silver, gold, platinum system integrator levels now. So that's something that now we're introducing that to our partners. So that's on the Rockwell University. So those are all the trainings that the basic competency trainings are there at the university. On course is what we used to call RACB. And so on course is the whole system of cloud-based demos. And so, I mean, last time I looked, there's probably 40 or 50 different cloud-based demos now that are accessed through OnCourse. Those are available to whoever would like to play with them. So we mentioned Logix Echo. There's a Logix Echo OnCourse demo that's available now that we can just spin up for you, for whoever would like to play with Logix Echo. There's PlantPAx is up there, analytics software is up there, Asset Center is up there. So just almost anything, almost any sort of software-based tool. There's also some hardware training that's on course now as well. We have to schedule that out a little bit more in advance. But that's, and some of the Rockwell University training links to OnCourse. So those are kind of side by side in some places. But if you ever want or interested in looking at a cloud-based demo to play with some software that you may not have, let us know and we can schedule you some time on OnCourse. Learning Plus is where we have all of our e-learning content. And so that is more of a training, a little more in-depth training with that would be paid for, or also training that might be part of a toolkit would be done through Learning Plus. So so that's available for subscription on the software portal. So you could get a subscription to Learning Plus and then take any number of courses depending on how many you want to take. But those are all self-paced e-learning. So if you didn't have time to go to an in-person training, but you did want to have some in-depth training, Learning Plus would be that tool for you. And then there also is, Thin Manager has been a Rockwell product for a while, but they're still done a little bit separately. So there is some self-paced Thin Manager training that's available through the Rockwell University as well. So if you guys are anyone interested in looking at that, just let us know, and we're more than happy to help you out with this these options.
Yeah, two quick things to note for system integrators and OEMs. If you don't currently have access to the Rockwell University.RAU, let us know and we can see about getting you guys access. It is a free kind of partnership tool. Not everything is in there, so they're building up the library, but it is all on demand. So as David mentioned, Thin Manager, that's a full certification system. It goes through RAU. There's no cost for it. It's all virtual. It used to be a roadshow event. Now you can just basically register it and get on a specific time zone. The Learning Plus side of it, that is a paid for, but in terms of what we're talking about today, if a system integrator is looking to get certified in PlantPAx, there's multiple steps involved. One of those is a full course. I think it's PRC 201 that needs to be taken. And I think at least 2 individuals as part of that system integrator need to go through that training. What ends up happening is you can either now do that as a 5-day in-person course, or you can do it via Learning Plus. It's a bit of a fraction of the cost. It is part of an on-demand session side of it, but you still have to kind of sign up and do the subscription portion of it. This also on the Learning Plus is nice for companies when you guys are looking at training up multiple employees. It could be either an individual session or it could be more of a full system where you can do like a full year. Everybody has access and you can kind of monitor folks' progress. So Learning Plus is a big push that Rockwell is doing for all of the e-learning functionality. But the on-course, RAU, even Thin Manager, all of that is free to use. It's just a matter of making sure you have access and that you guys are able to kind of use that. So let us know if you don't have access or you're looking for access for that. We can make sure to get the right people that login info.
So any questions? That concludes the written presentation.
Okay, so at this time, we'll let you guys go online. I appreciate you joining. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to us.